They didn't allow the New York Post back into their account until 2 weeks later, but at least they acknowledged wrongdoing. Facebook, to this very day, has never acknowledged any wrongdoing at all in suppressing what was a true story and interfering in our election. And not only that, remember, the Democratic Party operative, Andy Stone, who made the announcement on behalf of Facebook, told an outright lie. He said, oh, look, we're just algorithmically suppressing the story pending a fact check by ourselves and our partners to make sure the documents are real. Where is that fact check from Facebook? It never came. You know why? Because the documents were real, and a fact check would have revealed that. They knew at the time the documents were real. They never did any fact check. They never released any fact check because that would have revealed that they censored true information. And I've privately and publicly called on Facebook to answer questions about what they did. Here is a DM I sent to Andy Stone, and I've also sent them similar private email inquiries back in April asking him, did you in fact do the fact check that you promised when announcing the censorship? And if so, what did it reveal? And you can see here, he didn't answer me. He's never answered me, nor has any Facebook official ever addressed these questions of why it is that they suppressed a true story and claimed that they were conducting a fact check that they never actually released to the public. Now, one of the crucial parts to realize about this did not just emerge suddenly, like as a panic move when the New York Post published this incriminating reporting. They had been planning for this for a long time. In fact, for years, the corporate media was open about the fact that they didn't want to make what they considered to be the same mistake they made in 2016, namely reporting. They believe that their reporting on the documents published by WikiLeaks about Hillary Clinton helped elect Donald Trump and harm Hillary Clinton. And they decided our job is not to do reporting. We should not report negatively on the Democratic Party candidate. We made a mistake in doing that. We just thought Hillary was going to win anyway, and that's why we did it. I had conversations the night that Trump was elected and Hillary was defeated where people at The Intercept came and said, we should apologize for the reporting that we did on the DNC archive that WikiLeaks published because that helped defeat Hillary. That's what they became convinced was their job, not to do reporting, but to avoid reporting and help the Democratic Party. And they spent 2 years planning how they would not report on information if it emerged in the leading up to the election for Donald Trump's reelection if it reflected poorly on the Democratic Party. Here's an article from February of 2020, so the beginning of the campaign year, from the New York Times. It reads, lawmakers are warned that Russia is meddling to re-elect Trump. A classified briefing to House members is said to have angered the president, who complained that Democrats would weaponize the disclosure. The article went on to say, quote, intelligence officials warned House lawmakers last week that Russia was interfering in the 2020 campaign to try and get President Trump reelected. 5 people with the matter said. A disclosure to Congress that angered Mr. Trump, who complained that Democrats would use it against him. It went on. And then here is the Washington Post on October 14th. So the day of the New York Post reporting saying, here's our new policy regarding hacked or leaked material during the final weeks of an election season. Be careful what is in your social media feeds. This is Glenn Kessler, the fact checker for the Washington Post, warning people on the day the New York Post report emerged to, quote, be careful what is in your social media feeds, obviously implying that the New York Post story was misinformation. What was a lie was what Glenn Kessler was implying. And note that the Washington Post rewrote their policy about how to report hacked or leaked material in the final weeks of an election to avoid what they did in 2016, which was do real reporting. And the argument was that if Russia, quote, interferes in our election again by releasing true and accurate information that might hurt the Democratic Party, like they did in 2016, according to the media, they should basically rewrite rules to allow them not to report on it, to be careful, to weigh context. Now, obviously, if some anti-Trump country had hacked into the Trump campaign and obtained documents to reveal serious corruption by the Trump campaign or Donald Trump, if, say, Iran or Venezuela or China or Palestine had used hackers to obtain incriminating dirt on Trump through hacking, obviously the New York Times and the Washington Post and every other media outlet would publish it. They wouldn't care that it came from a foreign power or that it was done by virtue of hacking. They would say what journalists have always said and what I say and still agree with, which is, as a journalist, you don't care where accurate material comes from. You don't care what the motive of the source is. You don't care why the source is giving you accurate information. The only two questions as a journalist that you should ask are, number one, is this information accurate? And number two, is in the public interest to know. That's the foundation of journalism, that inquiry. And if the answers to those questions are yes, the information is accurate and it's in the public interest to know, you publish it no matter what. They rewrote their guidelines to justify letting them not publish information that's accurate if it came late in the campaign and might have helped Joe Biden win because it was information that would have reflected poorly on him. And just to show you what an absolute corruption of the journalistic function this is, let's just look at a similar episode from 2016. As you might recall, the New York Times in October of 2016, so the month before the election, got hold of Donald Trump's tax returns, and they reported it, as they should have. Donald Trump tax records show he could have avoided taxes for nearly 2 decades, the Times found. Now, you know what's so interesting about that story? The New York Times, to this day, has no idea who sent them these documents. They don't know who the source was, and therefore, obviously, they don't know what motive the person had. It could have been a Russian, it could have been a hacker, could have been someone who stole it. It could have been someone who bribed the accountant. They didn't care. They published it anyway, because that's what journalists do. Here's what the New York Times article said, quote, "The tax documents consisted of 3 pages from what appeared to be Mr. Trump's 1995 tax returns. The pages were mailed last month to Susan Craig, a reporter at the Times who has written about Mr. Trump's finances. The 3 documents arrived by mail at the Times with a postmark indicating they had been sent from New York City. Their return address claimed the envelope had been sent from Trump Tower." Someone dropped it in the mail anonymously, and they ran with the story. Why? Because they authenticated it, and it was in the public interest. They didn't care whether it came from the Russians. They don't know if it did. Now, here is them justifying it. They were asked, how can you publish documents in 2016 that you don't know the origins of, that you don't know the provenance of? Here is Michael Barbaro, the host of the highly popular New York Times podcast, The Daily, who is citing his colleague David Barstow, who's a 2-time Pulitzer Prize winner, was the lead reporter on that story about Trump's tax returns. And he wrote here in the tweet, "This is why New York Times David Barstow does not care who leaked us Trump's tax returns or what the motivation was. This has always been the predominant journalistic ethos until 2020 when they rewrote the rules to protect Biden. We don't care how our source got the documents. We don't care who they are, and we don't care why they're leaking to us. All we care about is it true, and does the public have a right to know?" Listen to David Barstow, the New York Times reporter, justifying why they reported on these documents, even though they don't know who sent it to them.
You know, it's funny. People often, when there are conversations about whistleblowers, the conversation's often framed around, did they have noble intentions, or did they have some, was this score settling or some less than noble motive? From the years of doing this, I've found that sometimes whistleblowers with terrible motives come forward with incredible documents, and I've also had times when whistleblowers with just the most perfect, pristine motives come forward and the documents are worthless. What really matters to me is this information real? And if so, is it newsworthy?